on stage a new panel moderated by Bastien and Vidal, and he will be with two founders of social marketing platform. And Bastien will see what's the future of social marketing platform with two companies. Hearsay Social on one side, and Gigya that you might have seen here on the other side. So Bastien, please join me on stage. Jingle? Not even? OK. No jingle this time? No, please stay. OK. Hi.
Thank you. So we're welcoming now Clara Shih and John Elkaim from Gigya and Clara from Hearsay Social. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you, you too. Before we kick it off, actually, Clara and John, do you want to say a few words about you?
Sure. My name's Clara Shih. I'm the CEO and founder of Hearsay Social. We're based in Silicon Valley, but we recently expanded to Europe and have a French team who's here today. I'm also on the board of directors of Starbucks, and I wrote a book a few years ago called The Facebook Era.
I am John Elkhaim. I work for Gigya. I'm the VP of Marketing. And I'm based in the Silicon Valley as well, in Mountain View. As you can hear, I have a French accent, so I have strong ties with Europe. We're growing very fast, in fact, also in Europe. We have over 700 clients in US and adding a lot in Europe in the next quarter.
John, is John your real name?
No, I'm Jean-Sébastien.
Ah, OK, that sounds better. All right, thank you. So we're here to talk about the future of social marketing and social media platforms. Before we dive into the topic, it would be good for the audience to maybe scope it a little bit. So what do that encompass? So Clara, you wanna kick that off?
Sure. I think it's really interesting to see how social media platforms have evolved over the last decade. Of course, there's the consumer sites that we are very familiar with, but on the business side, I'd say that there have been 4 waves of social media management. The first wave was more collaboration and community-oriented, whether it was Lithium or Jive, now Chatter, Yammer, et cetera. The second wave after that took place during the rise of Twitter, and that was the listening platform. So social media monitoring, whether it's Buzzmetrics or it's Radian6, it was really important for brands before they even decided to go on social to listen first to what was being said to them and respond, whether it was for customer service or otherwise. The third wave, starting in 2008, 2009, was really the corporate marketing brand publishing platforms. This was the rise of Buddy Media, Vitru, Context Optional, a number of these firms that have subsequently been acquired, but some of them that are still standalone. And then the fourth wave, which is just emerging, and it's what we happen to do at Hearsay Social, is focused on employees and focused on salespeople acting as brand ambassadors on behalf of their companies.
Thank you, Clara. John.
So our view of the space is fairly similar, but the description was very focused on B2B. So there is a wave in social was really around social listening. And as you guys know, when you focus on your Facebook page, you don't really own it, right? So you have to pay to play nowadays to access your customers and your fans. So our belief since the beginning was to really focus on taking the social conversation and bringing it into the website of large brands. And we believe by doing that, you can really create authentic connection with the customers. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Notably, when you use social login, you're able to remove the transaction aspect and focus on the upper funnel, which is early on developing a relationship with someone and not waiting for the transaction to get their information.
All right, so we'll dive into that a bit more a bit later. So before we do, though, so let's talk about the networks themselves. If I remember correctly, and actually I cheated because I have notes right there, but Facebook for US brand, I'm going to talk about US brand just to give the big numbers. Facebook is used by something like 55 to 60% of them. Twitter, YouTube represent 13% each. Pinterest is somewhere around 2% and 15% for the others. So the question is, are we already, or are we going toward an hegemony of Facebook? Is that the only social network that actually brands should be looking at and working on?
So there's two thoughts. I mean, whenever you have social networks, there are inherent network effects. So the bigger you are, the more exponential valuable you are. I mean, this is how fax machines became popular, phones, and then now, email systems and protocols. Same goes for social networks. So I do think that that's why we're seeing this standardization or consolidation of various social networking sites. In terms of, will it be just Facebook? I think it's very clearly no. We're already seeing, Twitter and LinkedIn obviously have a lot of traction. But ultimately, for brands, it depends on where your audience is. And for certain brands, that might be Facebook, but for others, it could be another social networking site. So that's where I would start.
What's your take, John?
So just to give you an idea, so we have a very special view into this because we have, among the 700 brands, that allow us to see 1.5 billion users monthly doing activities and logging socially through the networks, right? So we see pretty much the distribution of people and the decision they are making by networks. So what we've seen in the last few quarters is a strong growth, actually, in fact, of Google+. They doubled in size as a share since 2011. And it's really also interesting to look at it not just overall, but by vertical. So for instance, in e-commerce, for sharing, Pinterest is actually very important. And we even see some data points around transactions. So we know, for instance, that a Pinterest pin is more valuable than a share on Facebook, for instance. So these are key information you need to know about when you're trying to do marketing activities.
So actually, it's interesting. You mentioned Pinterest, you mentioned Google+, and most importantly, you said vertical and a little bit more specificity into the network that matters to the brand. So we see, so I was talking about the hegemony of, the bigger social network at the beginning. The other thing that we see happening as well is the exact opposite, right? We see some social network that have very strong engagement from their users, but that are very, quote-unquote, niched, right, or very exclusive. Nextdoor, for example, is one of them. It's really just around your own neighborhood, physical neighborhood. So is that a trend also that matters? Is that a trend that is more than just a fad? And what does that mean for brands?
So I'll take that one because really Nextdoor is something I really care about. I think it's a very good example of how you can differentiate yourself as a social network. They identify your use case, which is, within your neighborhood, you could connect better with people around you. And the problem that people identify is the issue of trust. You don't want anyone that is not a true neighbor to have access to a lot of information about you that you might be sharing. You don't want people, if you're posting something, I have this stroller that I'm giving away for free. I don't want anyone that's on Craigslist to show up at my door front and get it. But
why is that?
If it's a neighbor, I'm okay with that, and I'm happy to give it away. So that's the sense of community, bringing back the sense of community. And I think it's a very valuable concept that can totally be applied to France as well.
Yeah, I agree with John. I think in terms of generic sharing, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Google+ already occupies that for most people in this room and more broadly. If you want to create a separate site, there has to be a very clear use case. And I do think that in that regard, for the latter, there's still a lot of opportunity for new social networking applications and sites to be created, just because that's the reality of how we live. We all have different spheres in our lives. Our neighbors are one form of network, our colleagues at work, and business professionals, that's another network. LinkedIn clearly tapped into that. But there's a lot of spheres that all of us have that are not yet fully addressed today through the existing set of networks.
And I agree with you also from personal basis, but doesn't that become then a big headache for the companies and the brand? What shall we do, right? And what should be our priorities to engage and to find the right network for our users?
So there's a lot of complexity in managing the different choices. There is complexity around the network itself. They all have different rules that you have to adhere to if you're going to use their functionalities. And the way you use the data as well is regulated. So if you want to respect the law, you have to really comply to their regulations. And in order to do that, it's really difficult for any company to do it properly if they don't really have sets of legal advisors and people who can update automatically the database based on regulation. So I'll give you a specific example, right? So let's say someone update their status on Facebook, right? You went from single to married. Though that was not something you agreed to share when you that person logged in. So if you're updating the information and that person decided that they didn't want to do it, you're not truly adhering to network rules, right? And there's many examples like that where you could be wrong about how you use the data. So having someone that manages sets of API to allow you to do that is really valuable.
Clara, you want to give us your take on that? And I'd love also to have your perspective on, specifically for the enterprise, those larger organizations who have a wide range of objectives as well. How do they go about making their social media strategy effective?
Sure. So regarding the complexity question, I mean, the personal data and privacy notwithstanding, I do think that is yet to be solved. We've always liked, we like complexity. People like complexity. And if you look at old media, the vast majority of people maybe subscribe to a few of the biggest magazines and newspapers that had sports sections, for example. But if you're really into sports, you'll also subscribe to a separate magazine about sports, or even specifically about football, or specifically about running. And I think social media, social networks are the same. People have that same desire to specialize, but also talk about it as part of the general interactions. In terms of what's happening in the enterprise, I mean, I think it's still very early for the enterprise. We talked on the main stage earlier about these really big ideas in the consumer space, but any of us who work in the enterprise knows that it takes a long time from a change management perspective to roll out even mobile devices and even social media. I mean, while many of us in this room have moved on, at big companies, this is still something that's very nascent, and it takes a lot of blocking and tackling. Technology is only a very small piece of it. There's a lot of selling that needs to happen with executives, with the IT departments to make all of this work, and I applaud those of you who are joining us in terms of you having the patience level to make this happen, because I think ultimately there is a lot of value to be unlocked by improving the way that we all work.
Well, and I guess a key aspect of the adoption is not only into the enterprise, but in companies in general, is being able to show, to measure actually the impact of those initiatives, right? So I'd love to talk a little bit about ROI and your perspective on, okay, well, we've been having those social media marketing platform for a little while. We've tried several things. There are tons of networks out there, and a few that matter more than others. But how do we effectively measure the effectiveness of all this work?
So for our use case, which is really geared to brands that are consumer, that are dealing with consumers, it's really about very concrete example of how you can improve the ROI of companies. So very simple. You're doing user registration, so someone is trying to transact with you, right? If there is friction, there is an abandonment rate, whether it's on a registration form or in the cart. If you reduce the abandonment rate, you see the ROI right away. When you use social as part of registration, you see right away a lift in conversion and obviously a reduction on abandonment rate. And also, you can do it in other ways, whether you're looking at sharing. So for instance, someone that shared and generated revenue is a lot more valuable than someone that shared is not generating revenue. So I'm sharing something, and now someone is making a purchase. I'm a true influencer. If I'm sharing with tons of people, but no one's acting upon it, I'm just noise, right? And you want to be able to distinguish that, and there's ways to do it. That's direct ROI right there.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I mean, John talked earlier about how Web 1.0 was easy. It was very transaction by transaction. All of us optimized for click-through rates and conversion, but it was very narrow view of the value that was being offered to the customer who was clicking, because even if that person didn't convert, there's a brand impression there that was difficult to make last over a course of time. With likes and with social logins, as John was talking about, with these relationships that brands and salespeople, marketers can now establish with these customers, there's an opportunity to take a longer term view, but that also makes it harder to measure. What we've done, and I'll just pick a local example. One of our customers is AXA, which is, of course, global financial services company headquartered here in Paris. They've got hundreds of thousands of insurance agents, and these agents are starting to create Facebook profiles and LinkedIn profiles, Google+, Twitter accounts to communicate as individuals with their customers and prospects. And it's really a thought leadership and educational channel for them, because a lot of people don't know about car safety. They don't know about retirement plans and how all of that works. And so it's an ideal opportunity to share meaningful content through social. But each time they post, they're not expecting someone to buy insurance. It's a much longer term view. So the way that we've been able to measure ROI is using outcome analysis, where we'll take two sample sets. There's a control group of customers that are not communicating through social with a particular financial advisor, and then there's a set of customers and prospects who are, and you look over a longitudinal period of time, 6 months or 12 months, enough to capture several sales cycles, and you look for whether there's a difference. And in every case that we've done this, there's been a considerable lift. And granted, it's correlation versus causality, but it's still really remarkable, and it really underscores the fact that the social population, that it justifies the brand spending more money on reaching those individuals and engaging them over long periods.
Okay, so we're here to talk about the future. Obviously, I'm told by Loic that the theme of this year is the next 10 years. One aspect for the future of a social media marketing platform is mobile, and I think it impacts both the adoption, the user engagement, as well as the adoption within the organization that actually use and has these social media strategies. So, what's your take on what are going to be the key elements to increase the adoption, and what is going to be the impact in general of mobile on those platforms?
So for mobile, one of the things that I think is critical is really first the identity aspect, right? So what people don't realize is that there is an issue with cookie. First, there's regulation around cookies that's going to be making life of marketers even more difficult than it is today. But also the aspect of being able to take the identity and unify it. So I'll give you an example. I go to a website, I start to browse, I identify the product I want to buy. I don't have the time to make the transaction now. I leave, I'm on my phone, and I have to redo everything, fill out forms. It's really a big hurdle for transactions. Now, if you use social login, right, you can pick up where you left off, right? It's really the experience we used to. In US, we use Netflix. I don't know if it's an analogy you guys are going to resonate with, but I'm watching a movie, right? I'm at home on my computer watching a movie, and then I leave, and later on I have time on my iPad, and then it automatically resumes where I was. And I think this is a kind of experience of continuity that people are going to expect moving forward.
Clara, what's your take on this one?
So I think, we've already seen the effect of mobile on ad formats. It's both the fact that there's a smaller screen to work with and people don't want to scroll right to click on an ad, and also because people now know to focus on organic posts. And so that's really why we've seen promoted posts take off. Bradley Horowitz was on the main stage earlier this afternoon talking about their new Plus Post ad format. It's all the same. It's all taking organic content and being able to promote it through paid media to drive greater impressions that way. So I think that'll continue to play out. And for any brand, whether it's an individual person like the salespeople we work with or a larger brand, it's really about that authentic content. And whether you end up, it's so good and that you're able to reach a very wide audience organically, or you end up promoting it, I think that will continue as a trend. The second thing is the growing importance of cloud-based applications and cloud-based data in particular. If you have all the data stored on your phone, but everyone's changing phones all the time, to John's point, that's extremely annoying for the user to have to re-enter everything each time. And then the third is the recognition that mobile isn't just, it's not just one category. I mean, the way that you would optimize your application or your content or your ads for a smartphone is very different than you would for a tablet, is very different than you would for a lot of the wearables and the Internet of Things that are now coming online.
You said one thing about, actually the use of the social media platform becoming a little bit more pervasive, within the organization. Isn't that actually becoming an additional challenge for the realization of the social media strategy, in the sense that, the core of those strategies is the engagement of the users, right? And if don't you become a little bit too industrial using those tools?
I think it's all about, and she just used the word I love, which is authentic connection. So, having authentic connection with customer, I think this is what we should aspire to. And the technology enables it today, and we can do it better, right? Now, there's two things, right? You have a very powerful tool in your hand. You have to know how to use it, right? And what I see from there's some brands that do it really well, and some people execute very poorly, right? And that's why sometimes it feels industrial. In our case, we really focused to nail down that concept of how do you help brand move forward the relationship with the client so that they feel they're having an authentic connection. So a real goal example is in life, right? So if we meet, your expectation is probably to exchange first name, last name with me. It's not to expect that I'm going to get your phone number and we're going to go and have lunch together, right? It's a progressive profiling of the users and taking that information as you progress the relationship, you're asking for more information.
And that's the danger, too, of some of these power tools, is that we end up automating too much, or we strip away the humanity from it. And so, I mean, the more that we can keep that in mind and make sure that we're not just delegating it to the university intern on our team, but really making it a core part of how we do business in an authentic way for our employees to communicate with one another, then it becomes a great channel to authentically communicate outside of the organization.
Well, we're running out of time, but thank you very much, both of you, for being here today. I recommend that you look up both Clara and John online to continue the conversation with them. Thank you both, and thank you everybody here for being here, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, guys.